if I right click and drop and decide to drop one, we got two left and one has been dropped. But if I drop all three drop. Nice. Hey there, I'm your host Lesawi, and this is part 18 of our inventory series. In today's video, we'll be creating the drop slider. So with that said, let's begin. Let's start by going to the content drawer, our inventory system folder, and UI. Now inside here, we want to create a new widget that's going to serve us as the drop slider. So let's right click, go to user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and let's call it WB_item slider. And let's open this up. Now inside here, let's start by adding a canvas panel to our screen. Then with that, I want to add a border, which is going to be called border_slider. And this in here, this border is going to represent the actual slider. We have the canvas on the screen just to be able to place the UI, the slider on our screen where we want it to be on our screen. That's why the canvas panel is there. With that, let's grab another border into this one and we'll leave it as it is. With that, I'll grab a vertical box, add it to this border. And on top of that, we'll grab an overlay. And let's set this up a little bit. So if I click on my canvas or the slider, I want the size. So if we go to border slider, I want the size to be 300 by 100. And this value I played around with, so I know this is going to look nice for me. Now for the color, I have one saved here. So we could also use that. Brush color. And there we go. For the border itself, then we have another color I can copy paste. So feel free to take it. Brush color. And there we go. Not exactly what I was thinking, but close enough. Let's make it more grayish. That will do for me. Okay. So once we've got this, on top of that, we have this, which we can remove the padding. Or let's, yeah, zero padding on that. This also has some padding to it, apparently. So border, let's go. We want some padding, so let's do, I don't know, 4. And we can change the background to be more grayish. Yeah, something like this is looking nice. Okay. So we have the vertical box and we have the overlay, which we want to fill the screen with. With that then, let's go ahead and add a slider to our overlay. The slider, what we can do is, let's do padding and overall. On the bottom, we'll remove it to 0. Let's fill it horizontally, something like that. Okay, so with that out of the way, next thing I want to do is grab a text, like so, into the overlay. And for the text, what we'll do is we'll set it to center align. I want the size to be about 15. And okay, that's fine. So the number would be 1, for example, and this would represent the slider amount. Let's also make this text variable and call it txt_item quantity. For the slider, we can bring it a little bit more down. So let's say on top, instead of 10 out of 20, 30, something like that. Next, while having the overlay selected, let's go ahead and grab ourselves a horizontal box, drag it into your overlay. Let's fill it up and let's make it half the size. So we'll do bottom, for example. And in here, I want to add the buttons. So for that, we'll grab a button, fill it out, and it should adjust itself. For the button, we'll name it button button cancel is our first button we want. So in here, I'll also grab a text, which is going to say cancel. Oof, that's a big text. 15 in font, and we'll just say cancel. So this itself doesn't need to have anything to change that value. For our next button, let's Control C and Control V that into our horizontal box. And this button we want to call drop. And let's also click on the text, call it drop. And we want this text to be variable. So txt underscore drop is what we'll call it. Select both buttons and do fill. And for the padding, you can go ahead, something like 10 or even 5 maybe, if 10's too much. And that's looking nice. Let's compile and save. Next, let's head to the event graph. And in here, what I want to do is, let's create two variables. One for our inventory, which is going to be the inventory component. So bpc underscore inventory. And we want this to be instance editable and exposed on spawn. Our next variable then we'll call index. And this we want to be an integer. And again, instance editable and exposed on spawn. Let's compile and save. Next, let's go ahead and open up the item tool widget. And inside here on the event graph, we want to create a new function called onDropSlider. In here, what we want to do is we'll create the widget for item slider. Now we have those two inputs, the inventory and the index, which we can get from here. Inventory and index. There we go. Out the back, we'll promote a variable, always good to have, wb underscore item slider. And eventually we'll add to viewport. Oops. And there we go. Okay. So let's compile and save this. And we need to go to item action and click. Is it? Yeah. So in here, we want to add then our slider. So drop isn't available yet or split. So we'll undrop slider, we'll get to drop, and let's compile and save. So with that, we could go ahead and test this now. So close it down, hit play, and we should get the drop option. So right click and drop, and we do, but it's in the top left corner. It's not really how we want it. So let's go and adjust it. Next, let's open up the item slider again and go to the event graph. And inside here, we'll begin by creating a new function called getItemQuantity. And we want this to be a pure function. So what this entails is we'll grab our inventory component. And with that, we have access to the item slots. And if we get access to the index, well, then we have the item. So index is right there. Voila. We then get the chance to break this open. And we would just want to return item quantity and close that. Item quantity, and we're in business. Let's compile and save. On the event graph then, let's begin by creating a custom event called setSliderValue. I'll copy paste that. I'll get rid of these three events. So we have this, and we'll do getItemQuantity. We want the slider option. Now, if you want to give the slider a name, feel free. Probably would be nice. Slider item quantity or drop slider, whatever you like. And we then do set value. Simple as that. And this will convert it for us. No extra effort required. This goes in there. And once again, I want to set the maximum value as well. Now, the thing with that slider is if we go back into the designer, here we have those values here, and those will be overridden if we have something happening here, like set value, set max value. Now for max value, anyway, by default, I just want to be 10. The minimum value I'll set to be 0. And the minimum value we start with is going to be, well, whatever amount we have, but let's just say it's 1 in here. So let's go back into our graph, or let's say minimum should be 0. Never mind, I'm all over the place, and the value should be 1. There we go. So back in the graph itself, we have the set value and set max value. And the max value, again, will come from here. So just like that, we'll do custom event, and we'll do set slot quantity. And for that, we need the text quantity. We'll do set text, grab your item quantity, plug it in, it'll convert it. And there we go. And lastly, we'll do click on your slider and do onValue changed. So this is when we're actually updating that slider. So the first thing I'll do from this value, let's truncate to an integer, promote it to a variable called item quantity, like so. And with that, we want to set the text again. So take your text, plug this in, and there we go. Let's compile and save. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and create a new function called set item slider position. In here, we want to get that border, so border slider. Again, if you don't have this available to you in the designer, just make sure it's variable. So this border here. With that, we'll do slot as canvas slot, and then we'll do set position, and this position will come from get mouse position on viewport, just like so. And the execution needs to go in here. Okay, and that's that. So let's compile and save that. And just before this actually takes place, let's go to the designer, and here we can adjust where this is going to spawn on the screen then. If you click on that, this is the mouse. So that's how relative to our mouse this will spawn while using this function. So on the event graph, we need to go up and do event pre-construct or event construct even. And here then we'll run set slider position. And on mouse leave, we'll remove from parent. We can try this, test it in a moment. Let's just go into the slider again on the designer and adjust it. So let's say we'll do 0.6 and like 0.4, and relative our mouse will be here. So let's compile, save, run this code, pick something up, and voila, there we go, looking nice. Back inside of the event graph of the item slider on event construct, we could go ahead and plug these events as well. So set slider value, we have them in here, set slider value. And we also have set slot quantity, item quantity, there we go. And let's compile and save. Next, let's go to our inventory system folder and to our inventory component. And in here, what we want to do is we'll create a new function called drop from inventory. And in here, we are going to need two inputs, one for the item ID, which is going to be name type, and the other item quantity, which is going to be an integer. Now in here, we want to use a for loop. Now a for loop begins with 0, but our items don't. So what we'll do is we'll do -1. Oops, so subtract 1 to negate that. And we'll go into the last index. This execution goes in here. And we'll do spawn actor from class. Okay. Now to do spawn transform, we can split that. Will come from the get drop location function we have, like that. In the class, since we got the item ID, so get item ID, get item data, and then we got break, and the class. Where would that be? From the mesh, right? Yeah, there we go. And let's hide everything then. We got the class plugged in, so we know what we're spawning in. And again, for the sound effects, I'll just steal the item ID. Get sound effects. Break that open. And then we what? We got the play sound effects function. And the sound we want to be drop. Let's hide everything else. Like so. Okay. And we're chilling for now. So let's compile and save. Next, we'll go ahead and create a function called remove from inventory. In here then, we want, again, two inputs, but this time we want an index and the quantity we want to drop. So drop quantity. We'll do get a copy of item slots. I'll split this and just promote them to local variables, local item ID and local item quantity. Plug them in. And we'll grab a sequence again. So this will be for the update inventory. So event graph, update inventory, like that. And here we'll have a branch. And we want to check if the get drop quantity is equal to the item quantity that we have. So local item quantity. And this will go into the condition. If true, well, that's pretty easy to do. So we'll do, what we can do is add to new slot, like so. And the item ID is going to be 0, item quantity is 0, and the index is our index here. So get index. That's untrue. And eventually we'll have the drop from inventory then. And the item ID will come from here. Get item ID, local ID, and the quantity is our drop quantity. So get drop quantity. Oops. And that's that. If we are false, then it's a little more tricky. Then we want to check if our drop quantity or the item quantity, the local one, is equal to 1. Because if that's the case, that means that's the last one remaining. So we'll plug that in here. On true, then we can grab this code in here, copy paste that. And this will set it to be nothing, item quantity nothing, index array is the same. And drop from inventory, the item quantity is going to be 1 because what? We only have 1 to drop. And okay, so on true then, what we want to do is we'll steal this, copy paste that. The first node is fine, 0, item quantity 0, we have got the index. And here, the drop quantity we want to be 1. And the reason for that is we've only got 1 to drop. On false, what we'll do is we'll grab our update slot like so. Out the back, we'll take this then. And the quantity we want to drop is the drop quantity. So get drop quantity. And this will go in here. And this will also, oops, go in here. And the index is our index, like always. And let's then compile and save. Next, let's open up the inventory system folder, go into UI, and we want to open up the item slider again. So where are you? Here. And on the event graph, we want to deal with the buttons. So button cancel. So unclicked, what we'll do is remove from parent. Then on button drop, unclicked, what we'll do is we'll remove. We need the inventory component. Remove from inventory. And the index we got in here, and we also got the item quantity as well. Let's compile and save. One more thing we could do is we could design the remove all from inventory function. So for that, we'll go into the content drawer, open up our inventory component again, create a new function called remove all from inventory. In here then we'll grab an index, which will be of type integer, get a item slots, get a copy of that index, promote this, split that to item local, item ID, and again, local item quantity, like so. And with that, again, we'll have a sequence to update our inventory, event graph, update inventory, and on 1 or 0, we again will do add to new slot. If I find it, add to new slot. Array is the same, item ID is 0, item quantity is 0. The index is our local index here, so get index like that. And we're removing also this index is going to be 0, of course, and then we'll do drop from inventory, which we want the item ID to be whatever this item ID is, and then the quantity, which we have in here. Cool, that's that. Let's compile and save. Next, let's open up the inventory system UI and go into the inventory slot. So for that, we got this inventory slot there. Let's go to the event graph, and we want one event called onDrag cancelled. So go to functions, go to override, and we find onDrag cancelled. Well, in that case, we'll grab our inventory and do remove all from inventory. So this happens if you drag the mouse outside of the valid slots that it can drop to. So let's drag that and compile and save, and let's test it. So let's go ahead and hit play. And for example, I'll pick up the bow. These are only 1 items. If I hit drop, they should drop, and they do at my location as well. So drop. And again, no sounds, probably because I don't have them in the data table. So just make sure you add those. Oops. Cancel. Nice. What about the potions? If I drag, oops, come back to me. Still need to fix the hotbar, kind of in the way. But if I right click and drop and decide to drop 1, we got 2 left and 1 has been dropped. But if I drop all 3 drop. Nice. So this is it for the video. In the next episode, we'll be creating the item slider for splitting. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, leave a like. And as always, happy developing.